I'll start by ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Media Watch. I'm your host, Dr. Sally. This year we've had a fantastic year with loads and loads of guests from all different backgrounds, some really great role models. People who are psychologists, we've had people who are police people, and we've had musicians, and we've also had magicians. And we look forward to seeing new guests coming on board. If you want to come on board, you can also do that by sending me an email at info@seekchannel.tv. Let's go now back into the last few shows. We've taken snippets so you can see the best of 2017.
We can't really talk on behalf of that individual because I'm not even sure whether we can even call him a human being, but we don't know what's really gone on in his life. But I'm absolutely 100% in alignment with what Chief Superintendent's just shared. And the reality is, in my opinion, that it's a combination of communication. We have now, we're in the heightened position of, I don't think the globe's been so connected ever in our lifetime in the humanities as we understand it. You can drop a pin in London and somebody, you know, in the North Pole would have probably watched it on YouTube or some format today. So influences of its heightened position, in my opinion. So, you know, we've got to basically understand that this is an inevitable part of society right now. As much as we can influence people, news also travels that quick. So some of the things that probably did happen in the localities of a village or a town are not necessarily hidden from society anymure.
Could it be that we've got so much news media now that news is so quick to get? Whereas in the past, there could have been that same level of violence in society that was
already
hidden,
there.
you know? I mean, I know that you were talking about crime statistics. There is this issue about that burglaries have gone down, but maybe there's different types of crimes that are on the increase. I mean, there's cybercrime. There's people doing some weird stuff to each other. You know?
Yeah. So I mean, so the classic crimes of theft and violence have gone down in London, although there's been a marginal increase recently. But the question about the news, as you portrayed it, so we know that the news enters our lives very quickly. We're all walking news bulletins. We've all got mobile phones. We're told almost before the police find out, many times, major incidents. So you've got the instantaneousness of it. Then you've got the recycling and the reliving of it and the constant flicker of those images that will start to affect people. I touched upon earlier on about predominantly young men in parts of London killing each other with knives. And we think it's a new phenomenon. We've had, the football hooligans of the 80s and 90s, attacking each other. We've got the mods and rockers of the 60s and 70s attacking each other. We've had a couple of world wars where the average age of the person dying was 19 years old, like the famous song about Vietnam War.
Castle. Yeah.
Exactly. Human beings have had a propensity for violence towards each other since forever, since Stone Age man and woman existed. So I think there is something about this propensity to violence. So have we lost humanity? I don't think we've lost humanity. I just don't think we're actually as human as we could be.
What's really disturbing for me is that, that humans don't tend to learn from the past. So if you look at things like Auschwitz, if you look at all the, the concentration camps, and we saw that repeated in more recent years as well, or you even see the Rohingya, people that are coming out of Burma. There's something inside humans that wants to cause serious amounts of damage to other people.
Yeah.
And there'll be minor things that they'll start fighting each other about. But it doesn't take long. We saw that recently with the right-wing party emerging in Germany as well, that a country like Germany, which has got such a disturbed past, those kind of remnants of fascism seem to emerge again, don't they?
No, please, Karen.
No, I mean, it's got, I mean, the whole Austria, Germany, positioning around right-wing politics, it's quite frightening because the Second World War wasn't that long ago, really. It's in the memories of probably certainly our parents.
Absolutely.
And if we're lucky enough, any of us have our grandparents, will definitely remember the Second World War and all that. So the rise of the right wing in France, Germany, Holland, Austria is a worrying trend. But you do get these sort of cycles of the right wing making an appearance and then left wing or socialism tends to take over. What's different now is that this gets played out in the media or gets played out in your pocket on your mobile phone. So, the grooming of, whether it's for ISIS terrorism or right-wing terrorism or Sikh terrorism, whichever way you want to look at it, they are people grooming young men and women. Whereas as parents, we're sitting downstairs watching EastEnders, our children are upstairs, we don't know who they're talking to. So, we're getting adults grooming young children for all sorts of acts, whether it's child sexual exploitation or terrorism or committing crimes on their behalf, whatever it might be. That's for me is the worry, is that this right-wing, left-wing issue, I think it's kind of existed for a long time.
But is it worrying for us to think about the fact there's this alt-left, alt-right thing that people, when recently there was all that violence in the US and no one really stood up and said those white supremacists should not have been doing what they were doing, or the misunderstanding of Black Lives Matter. What we see, there's also this underlying thing in society where you might find Hindu fundamentalism or fascism, like the RSS, that they're doing things on the kind of subversive, they're doing things covertly. You can't actually see it on the surface, and then sometimes things are institutionalized where certain people like each other in particular ways or do each other favors. So sometimes even some of that agenda is not played out in black and white. But what I would say, as more of a question for you, Suki, is that if you look at leadership, right, someone like Donald Trump, we're not criticizing anyone, we're just saying, is it not important to be, rather than actually be positioned to say, well, this is a debate that we need to have, there's too much playing it safe. Let's not talk about guns right now, let's not talk about the right wing right now, it's not just the right wing, it's the left wing. So, going, hang on a second, what is right, but then in whose view? But we do know from history, the negative stuff really does come from an extreme element, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I mean, thank you for asking such a great question. It's multifaceted, as we understand, but there are levels of, we have to boil down to the fact of media, because our current influence, as Chief Superintendent said again, is that specifically we're walking around with these little beacons that are telling us information. So there's Chomsky, who talks specifically about consented influence. He's talking about how by just opening up and reading the latest news, we're already accepting the influence. And there is no doubt that media is managed, and it's planned, because if you remember a few years back, just bringing it back to the UK, if I may, all of a sudden there was around the 2010, 2011, we had a big issue around dogs, being mauling animals and beautiful, babies and attacking children, and some fatalities. But I'm very certain that hasn't disappeared, but all of a sudden it was a big thing at the time. So there's some kind of a plan. And then we have to ask a bigger question, that how much of media is contrived just for an element of control? Because if we have something like a being up on it, we're saying we remain distracted. So under the context of leadership, I think, in accordance with the way Guru Nanak Dev Ji has also shared it as well, in the way I understand it, is that we have to learn to look after ourselves.
And other people in high profile positions go along for years and years and years and get away with this. Even if you look at the situation with the girls that were abused, I mean, for so many years it just kind of goes on, and no one does anything about it. Well, why is that? Is it some kind of power that these people have?
I think they're at such a premature stage in their career, and they want to break through into the acting world, and it will just damage their reputation, because the Jimmy Saviles and the whoever's are so high profiled that they think, oh gosh, if I go out there and I make a big hoo-ha about it and state that this person did this and this, their reputation is just going to go downhill and they won't make it into the acting world.
Do you think that sometimes it's a threatening position as well, where they say, well, if you don't do this, then basically it's over?
Yeah, basically, and it might be something that they've aspire to be doing from such a young age, and then there's this one individual that can literally just break that dream. So that, I believe, is possibly one of the reasons they keep hidden, and it doesn't come out until years later, until someone else has spoken out and said the same thing, and then they put their hand up and say, actually, I've gone through this experience with that same individual as well. And it's that support system that they need from other individuals.
It almost seems that some of the corporate world are a bit kind of immune to any kind of the regular checks that people need to have when they're dealing with people. Anything can happen. For example, in education, there's the CRB check and stuff that happens, isn't there, to make sure that you can work with children and you are checked out properly. I mean, in your particular field of work, you've gone through that whole process.
Yes.
But is that something that you feel is really important?
Well, I think there are various places in education where inappropriate behaviour takes place, not necessarily in one sense, it could be in another place, like bullying as well. The CRB just really checks that there's been nothing so far, and of course it's a great first step, but obviously you need to have vigilance, you need to be vigilant with your peers, you need to listen to the thoughts that come through, and obviously try your best to follow up on any complaints, even if it just turns out to be a disgruntled employee or someone who's just trying to make noise without foundation, but you still owe that to the person who is actually being genuine. So yeah, even in education, you have to be vigilant.
It's quite interesting issue that you mentioned the thing about bullying, and we did talk about it last week actually with our guest last week, that someone did a survey recently and said that it takes, if a child is at school and gets bullied, then it sometimes takes up to 3 years before they actually forget the fact that they were bullied, and that kind of impact on their personal life and what they do kind of disappears. I mean, I would probably say not actually. I think if you are bullied, it probably stays with you for longer.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's kind of internal, isn't it? Yeah, so that's pretty bad. So let's talk about some other news that's going on as well. Talk about education, right? So the Ofsted boss recently said something about the fact that, not saying that testing was bad, but there's a lot of testing that's taking place. And then you, in your particular field of work, you do a lot of tuition and stuff.
That's correct,
in your educational area. Do you think that there's too much of an emphasis on testing? Should there not be a, think about the wider world, read more books, that kind of stuff? And that's, I think, the statement that she was making actually, that maybe the people should read more books, can be e-books as well. But, is there too much?
I would say that there's a lot of focus on testing in school because we need to have a way to monitor how students are doing, and even though tests aren't necessarily the best way to measure how a student is learning and how they're progressing, it is the only way that's fair. It's the only way that we can come up with which is fair for everyone. And there is a lot of focus in the education world towards developing soft skills and also wider reading. It's not necessarily easy to measure that, so we are still using tests to gather data. So
your company is called Elite Tuition, isn't it?
That's correct,
right?
yes.
So in Elite Tuition, you kind of focus, you've got a very good success rate apparently.
Thank you.
Really, I heard statistics are really good. But then, are they worldly wise? Do you think there's a risk also that people only train to do exams and then get into good? I mean, I don't know what the age range you've got. A GCSE, isn't it?
GCSE and A-level, yes.
Yeah.
90% of our business is A-level.
Right.
Do we coach for the exam? Of course. It is the only real metric that we use, and it's the reason we are mandated by the parent.
But are the exams different to what they were before? Because before it was a continuous assessment, and now it's like a one-hit. If you don't do well on that day, that's it. It's over, baby.
That's correct. Yeah. No. It's one of the great challenges that students now face, and having linear papers with exams at the end of the course means that you don't get to build up some marks before you sit to that final exam. So if you have a bad day, I mean, it's not on one day, so you've got multiple exams on different days, but if you have a bad period, let's say if you have a bereavement in the family, obviously it can work against you. You mentioned about whether students who are developing the skills to cope with that exam at the end, whether they're just having too much of a disproportionate focus on assessment and not necessarily developing other important skills. And in my personal experience of working with students, I think working towards any challenge develops those skills, develops resilience, develops wider reading, develops management of your anxiety. And I think those are the skills that one takes when they succeed in this challenge. So even though Elite Tuition is mandated to prepare students for that exam, a huge focus of that is how to actually identify what your weakness is and how to work on that. And it's the foundation of our teaching system which has led to our success. And I think
it's interesting actually you say that, because you could argue all the skills that you mentioned, about being more focused, being more kind of worldly wide, right? One of the biggest criticisms about graduates, when we go on to graduates, when they leave and they're trying to get a job, right, or they're trying to make their way in career, is that the companies actually say they haven't got enough commercial experience. And the problem is that how can I get a job, right?
Yeah.
How can I get experience unless I get a job, right? It's kind of like, it kind of hits against it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So is there something that really they can do better in terms of becoming more, I mean, this is probably the point that she's making actually, to become more worldly wise, right? Read more books, understand about politics, know about your environment around you. And sometimes, when I was studying, I was thinking, if I mention something that's in the news and I make it relevant to the answer, the examiner might think, oh, he's a smart person, or actually that's not the answer to the question.
Yes.
But it does make you a bit more understanding, doesn't it, in terms of this person really can relate to the real world. You know?
I think with regards to graduates today and what you mentioned about seeing the bigger picture, I think one of the challenges that students have had going through school is that it's very didactic.
We have actually started up a new initiative, which is Sikh Role Model. And on there we're featuring people like Pritinder about what they're doing and things like that, and you're on there as well. We'll put you on. Right? But the whole point is to get the kind of face of Sikhi out there, to say, look, there's loads of Sikhs out there that are doing very fabulous, fantastic things, very inspiring things. Yeah, Sikhi is strong. Sikhi is not going anywhere. And it was just to hear his story. It was very inspiring to say, look, someone from the Punjab come down to the UK on their own initiative, right, their own skill, own determination, right, and is making an effort to actually do something about it. And that is very inspiring for the youth, because we hear all these stories about the drugs and all these kind of things, but we don't really see the good stuff that's coming out of Punjab.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's very important for people like Shreddy Singh to come out there and say, this is what I'm doing, this is what's going on.
So there are people doing good things. So
Absolutely.
people doing good music, dance arrangements, or directors, film producers, they do some great stuff. I mean, even you go to seatnet.com, you can actually see some of the film festivals. There's a lot of movies that are made out there.
Yeah, see, I tell you what, people know me just as a fitness model, Sikh fitness model, but I myself treat myself as an artist, right? My art is fitness. So any people who are specialized in music or maybe in painting, singing, they all are artists. We are categorized in the same route, artists, right? So let's say, like last night we had a talk, a real talk at the dinner club. So I told about myself, how I started. So it's really good to tell about your entire success story. Like I started from scrap, from zero.
Yeah.
So the story from zero to hero is not easy.
And as we were just talking before, because we've got time to talk about this, we've got limited time, but I really wanted to bring this point out. You qualified. You got some great qualifications. You did an MBA, right? And you went through quite a lot of interviews. You did additional qualifications, and then you got an offer eventually, because you got to go to a lot of interviews. Sometimes it's really difficult to get a job. It feels like India has some kind of quota type things as well, doesn't it?
Exactly.
But anyway, regardless of that, then you had an offer on the table. What was the thing that went in your mind at that point? You thought, you know what, I've been going to the gym for a while. I think that this could be a better path rather than doing the kind of traditional, I'll be a clerk and I'll be promoted in a bank and one day I'll manage an entire bank, and I'll look at the safe on the wall with all the cash inside it, right, and help people out that way. But what made you decide, I'm going to do this fitness route and become somebody who can provide that advice as a business as well, but also to help enrich people's lives to become stronger and longer lasting,
Okay, so what I think, there are many people who achieve a lot of things in their life, but the actual achievement is that which makes you happy. If you're not happy and there is something you achieved, doesn't bother. Does it make sense? Right? So when I worked hard for my getting a job, I have worked hard to crack a competition exams for a banking sector. So after 1 year, I finally cracked one exam, and they just called me for the interview. I qualified the interview, and they just sent me the call letter, you have to just sign, and they call you for the training for 1 month, then you just get your a government job. But when I cracked that exam, I had the offer letter. I was not happy with my achievement. I was just like, man, I worked hard for it, but it doesn't make me happy. It's finally here. So I just started recalling what makes me happy in my entire day.
Did you make a list, or did you just think about it?
Just recall. Right, I did this, what I do from since morning to night. So I just recall, and I just realized I am working out from last, that time it was 7 years. Now it's 12 years. It's 5 years back, I'm telling. So I just realized from last 7 years, I am consistently lifting. That 1 hour makes me happy. I started my day early, 6 a.m., but my energy should be 0 at 8 p.m. But when I entered to the gym 8 p.m., I was full of energy.
Okay.
When the music hits in my ear, and I lift the heavy weights. I was not the same person when I entered to the gym. So I realized this is something now in my blood, in my breath. So I decided that this is the right passion for me, this is the right profession for me.
Highest priorities are, and does it serve them better to stay there, being able to cope emotionally with what's going on? Because if you look at our leaders, the higher up you go in an area of influence, the more more emotional mastery you actually require. So the bigger the game you play, the more you need to be able to equilibrate emotion. So that's really the work that inspires us, is helping people develop the toolkit that you need to be able to do that in challenging situations. So it's not whether you'll be challenged or not, it's not whether you'll get emotional or not, that will happen, but it's how long do you stay emotional and how much does that run you.
But what happens in a situation, you know, so let's take it out of the corporate context, right? Let's put it into a situation where there's a relationship between a man and a woman, right? And often you find that if it is a really negative situation to the woman, right? With Guru birthday last week, and one of the great things that he spoke about, a revolutionary, equality, men and women, serve society. And I always think, I hope there'll be more places where people could go, maybe funded by some of society or culture, or to say, look, this is a place where you can go, which is a good place for refuse. If you are in an abusive relationship or whatever. It's often really difficult to get out of that relationship, because it's either the kids that are there that they need support or need protecting, right, because of that relationship. And it's the money situation as well. Sometimes money is controlled by one party versus the other one, right? And so the vulnerability of that individual and the courage that person needs to have to get out of that relationship, and the same in the workplace. They may think, I might not be able to get a job elsewhere because they haven't got the confidence, because it's been so beaten up, or genuinely they can't get a job because clearly the market's difficult. It's a difficult market at the moment. They can't get a job. It's difficult to apply. They haven't got time to go and get a job. So it's very easy for us to say, just walk out the door. But sometimes there are other dynamics that stop you from doing that, So what do you do then,
Well, we would never say walk out the door.
Yeah.
That's what you were going to say.
Yeah, I was literally just going to say that. Yeah. Well, we wouldn't say walk out the door.
I wasn't saying that you would, but I'm just saying generally, with just leave it,
No, I think whether it be, as you said, in a relationship or a workplace, BC, sometimes we judge and think, that relationship's not really good, or we'll say that job's not good for you, you should get out. The moment we start to say that to people, what we're doing is we're actually judging them through our lens, and we're saying to them, according to us, you should be doing this. The minute you start shooting on other people, it's actually you imposing what you think is your priorities. But the reality of it is, nobody's going to leave a job or a relationship until they see in their perception that they have more benefits than drawbacks in staying there. So if a person is in a, I think Helen said a great thing about, a label, and you said toxic. It's about actually, let's just have a look. What are you perceiving is toxic in this workplace? Because it could just be that actually, they say some bad stuff about my family, and now it's a toxic, culture, for example. So it's really getting in there, finding out what the issues are, whether it be in a relationship or a workplace, and helping them actually get out of that emotional reaction. Once you neutralize perceptions, you're then making a decision whether you should leave the relationship or leave the job or stay in either situation based on action and not just emotional reaction. Because I know when we get, if we get in very high emotional reaction, we'll just walk out the door, and then afterwards we'll think, oh, did I do the right thing? But really, when you take a decision from action, you're going to make the decision whether you perceive it to be right or wrong. It's going to be from more of an open-hearted, I'm going to see that there are equal drawbacks of what decision I do make.
And sometimes I think it's important, even on both sides, to come together, isn't it? I mean, they talk about that pounding of two individuals. They pound like this, and then they say, actually, do you know what? If you stopped for a second and you stop pounding and just looked at it from this angle, you'd say, you're pounding each other here, but really these are the important things that are common to both of you, and maybe you need to kind of get to a consensus where it's good for all parties. So you kind of work with the whole structure. I think that's important.
Yeah, it's very much like you said, good for all parties. What we do is we help people see how there is a win-win situation for everyone, and that win-win situation just comes back to, this is why we call it the master key, because once people can see that whatever they're doing, whatever task they're doing at work, whatever relationship is that is fulfilling their highest priorities, they'll be there. The moment they perceive it's not being fulfilled, they'll be out the job or they'll be out the relationship.
Yeah, it's a very difficult, critical decision making. It's difficult to do, but sometimes it's good to help that facilitate. So let's concentrate. We've spoken a lot about all the great things that you do. Let's talk about individually to you. I'll start off with you. Tell us, why did you go down this route? Because I know that you've been doing this for a while, and you are fellow directors. You're based like on
different sides of this, almost on this wonderful globe. Yes.
As the world spins,
Australia's there.
The sun never what's it called? Follow the sun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is the fact that when you go to sleep, you wake up.
Yeah,
you
that's
carry on
right.
with the work, and then before you go to sleep.
Skype meetings.
Can you sort this out for me? I'm just going to bed now. So next, which is lovely because you cover the whole world. I think it's called. I mean, for you, especially, it must be really hard work to get into a major brand like that. And for you, it's difficult to get into the mainstream media in terms of not only the shows, For
Amaddeep's, it's quite. His stuff is so visual that you see it and it's like whoa, and you want to share it and you want to show it, and it's quite not easier, but it's quite. People want to see it. You don't have to really talk them into it. Whereas with my kind of thing, offering henna as a business, it was very difficult because people only thought, oh, it's an Indian thing, number one. Yeah. Then they thought, oh, it's only for weddings. Then, we got the thing, oh, people will only have it in the summer. So Selfridges actually made us trial for a whole year before they made us permanent. But thankfully, we were just as busy at Christmas as we were over the summer. So, now we've got a Halloween menu, we've got a Christmas menu, we've got a festival menu. And so we're moving with, and it's really changing the way we offer henna. It's putting it in a whole different light, completely different light.
So people use henna on their hair as well, don't they?
Yeah, people use henna on their hair, on their eyebrows. Yeah. We also do for cancer patients henna crowns. Right, okay. So we put henna on their scalps when they're undergoing chemotherapy. It's just so versatile. You've got Beyonce who had it on her baby bump.
Yeah, she did. Yeah.
You've got Rihanna tattooed a henna design on her hand. So it's really coming out and being pulled into the mainstream. And by us offering it in such well-known department stores, it just makes it so accessible.
And I think that point is the one about the mainstream is that as it becomes a fashion, inverted commas, it becomes more acceptable to something that you'd want to go and actually pursue, right? Yeah. Music is not, or even being a magician is. It's a different thing. It's an entertainment thing, right? So I often, because I'm a big music fan, and I was saying this to you earlier on, when I actually listen to Radio 1, I think, hey, there must be more music than this going out.
Sure,
And it's very easy for someone to sit back and go, well, where did that artist come from, and where did that rap star suddenly come from? Yeah. But they might have been working really hard in the background, maybe did a lot of club scenes to be able to get to a point where they could become successful. So it's very easy for us to be critical. And I know that genuinely you've done a lot of hard work. You've worked really hard in different places to be up and coming. Whether it be a comedian, I'm not comparing you to a comedian, I'm just saying whether it be a comedian who works a lot of the clubs, or somebody who's a singer who may be in a lot of amateur groups, or actors that do amateur work. Eventually they put the hard work in and they get an opportunity. That's right. I mean, how does that opportunity? Is it researchers that give you a call and say, hey, we've heard about you? How do you get to be picked up by the mainstream and be given that kind of opportunity?
I tell you what's helped a lot is social media, especially in this day and age.
That you're doing, right?
And I'm pushing as much as I can, as best as I can. I'm still learning every single day. My wife and I, actually just a couple of days ago, I had a lesson in social media on how we can kind of accentuate our work even more so and get it out to the masses. And it's a job within itself, correct? It's fascinating, the whole world of social media. But it has helped in the way where I've got noticed by various people around the world, so it's got me work around the world to do launch parties, launches of hotels, cars, and all sorts of various things, and even TV job opportunities, which is brilliant. Even like talent shows as well.
Reality type stuff?
Reality type talent shows.
You had an opportunity in
I have, and it was quite an interesting story in that respect. I got the opportunity to go onto the show and exhibit my work, and
they loved it, didn't they?
They loved it, and I got pretty far with the whole process. But they got to a point where they decided not to put me through for X, Y, Z reasons, which I did find out down the line as to why. This may be true, this may not be true, but it is what it is. And the way I look at it is just use it as a blessing in disguise, and that wasn't for me. So I've just got to keep pursuing doing what I do best. And
I think the great thing is that it's a confidence booster, even if you don't make it through, because it's not your decision that you didn't make it. It was possibly another alternative agenda that was operating that you couldn't control. The fact that you gave it your best shot, and you were in a position where you were given the all clear. There was something else going on.
The experience,
absolutely,
walk away with. I mean, I remember that my first pop-up that I had in Topshop, we had it for 4 weeks, and literally we had a trolley, some Mendy, and a bit of glitter. That was it. And I say this to date, that although it was crazy and something I had such a tough time going through, I learnt more in those 4 weeks than I did in my 3 years at uni. So the lesson that you walk away with, no matter how hard it is, and you've learnt a valuable lesson of how TV works, how showbiz works, and that knowledge, you can't. That's priceless.
I think it's a credit to both of you that you're very optimistic.
You have to be, otherwise
you're going to go, it's not going to work. I don't want to try this again.
Sometimes we have our days where we're like, but then I think that because we love what we're doing so much. I mean, the highs are high. We've had this discussion. The highs are high, the lows are low. But he loves his magic so much. It'll be at 1 o'clock in the morning. He's like, "Oh, can I try this trick on you? Can I practice this one?" Or I'll be like, "Right, so I'm going to do this, and I'm going to launch this, and I'm going to do that." So we're always talking about what we want to do next, and try not to dwell too much about what's going wrong, because to be quite honest, a lot has gone right. So
true. They just stick out like a sore thumb sometimes. I know.
And when we speak to others about what they're doing and how they would like to go for their dreams and what position they're in, we look at each other and we're like, gosh, I'm so thankful that we've been able to go for our dreams and been able to pursue our passion. We've had supportive families, we've got each other, we've got a roof over our heads, we've got food in our stomach, we're okay, we're fine. So we're all right to keep going.
That's an important thing that you mentioned about families as well. Families supporting, having that kind of guidance, as well as making sure that when, like you said, when you are down, we're all human. At the end of the day, we're going to go, we could have done that, but someone picking you up again, somebody around you to support. Sometimes, if there's a relationship between two people, one person is being kind of influenced by somebody else, and that kind of gets through, and it creates a frustration. Because I've seen that in some cases where it's like somebody won't say something to someone direct, but it'll be indirect, and the indirect comms causes the issue and the problem.
It comes down to the attitude and behaviour of the ABC. You've got to physically think about actually what's going on here, and once again, it's going back to the I, we, and us, taking away the I and working on the us. Rather, if you've got I've had a situation where people have gone on and nitpicked at what the problem is in the relationship, yet on the same token they can quite easily go, actually, what can we do now to resolve this? And I've been in situations where people argue, and by the time they finish the argument, the point that they had is not relevant.
Can it be sometimes that petty arguments as well, isn't it? Like little things, isn't it?
Well, it works on emotions, especially when you're in anger mode. First of all, your breathing goes. You're not breathing straight, so your heart is pumping deoxygenated blood around your body, goes to your brain, then the brain is actually then saying, actually, I've got to do something, so you go to fight, flight, or freeze mode. And then whatever comes into the mind, the body releases out. So sometimes when you're in heated exchange in a relationship, you don't actually make sense all the time, or you pick up on stuff that you did 10, 20 years ago and just bring it out because that's where the mind is in. But sometimes when you stop, you breathe, you focus, and actually, what is the problem? Oh, I've left the toilet seat up. Darling, I'm very sorry. Won't do it again. Let's work.
So it could be a minor, but it's kind of an underlying irritating thing.
It can be as minor as that, or it could be as major as something else, or cheating, or working on and having affairs, which ultimately could potentially lead to divorce, which is quite common nowadays.
So is that, do you think it's increasing, do you think?
It certainly is increasing a lot.
Do you think it's down to the pressure of living, in terms of that, we live in a fast-paced life, everyone's on chats on, things like WhatsApp and social media and stuff. Do you think we've got X amount of time to watch X number of TV programs, one serial after another on Netflix? Someone's got a different interest to somebody else. Do you think that all of that compounds into what probably didn't happen maybe 20 years ago because there was only 4 channels on TV?
TV media is a big thing, but nowadays it's a lot of people don't have time time is very, very precious. Sitting down and talking to someone is worth its weight in gold. Being in a position where you can talk to someone and talk about your insecurities, what your flaws are, and how things are quite difficult to you, because with stresses of work and strains of work, it's really, really hard. And especially myself, I live in London, and the commute from your work to your home, and
that's a killer, isn't it?
That's a killer,
take time, yeah.
And can stress you out. And it's one of those things. Quite a lot of people not talking nowadays, and especially with social media and apps, they'll text each other and say how things are. But with a text message, you're not going to get your point across. You can get what's black and white.
It can be misconstrued as well. People write text, which is, I didn't mean that, I meant that,
Because text messages and WhatsApp, they're fantastic, but they don't convey your emotions, your thoughts, your processes.
As a quick update, apparently you can now delete your WhatsApp messages. That's in the latest version of WhatsApp. You can delete them if you sent them by accident. There's going to be a little inner editor in your head saying, maybe I shouldn't have sent that. Delete.
A lot of relationships have broken up
because of
WhatsApp.
Because of WhatsApp. Very good. Not very good. Or sent to the wrong group, unfortunately. So it's a very interesting area, actually. This whole thing about maintaining relationships and obviously that balance of living as well as living for each other.
It's probably I was in a conference recently, and one of the guys goes, it's easier to have a living out girlfriend who you meet for 3 hours, best behaviour, wine, dine, and work through what it is, than to have someone living with you 24 hours a day.
Right.
Because in that 3 hours you can be in your best behaviour. But when you live with someone, when you're in a marriage with someone, or nowadays cohabiting with someone, it can be quite difficult.
Is that old joke when you see a man and a woman in a car, if they're not talking to each other, they're probably married, but if they are talking to each other, they're not married yet, because they got so used to each other,
It's one of those things, if I said to you as an individual, do you really know yourself? Because when you were slightly younger, when you weren't a doctor, your thoughts, your processes were different. Now you're a qualified doctor, and your thoughts and processes have changed. So even when we take it from a personal perspective and bring on, you look at yourself, you don't know who you are, what you are. You don't know what you can be thinking in 5 years' time from now.
What do you think of a lot of people are following this kind of like mindfulness, and that kind of, is it all nice and complementary? Does it help a person realise who they are and what they're doing at a particular time?
If it helps you, it helps you. There's no right or wrong. It's whatever suits you. There's no one size fits all.
Right.
Whatever complementary mindfulness, if it's NLP, if it's counselling.
So as you can tell, we're over here in Oxford Circus at the height of Christmas season, the celebration of the New Year. Some of us get carried away with all the Christmas stuff, but it's also important to remember all the sicky activities as well. I'll leave you to do your research and all the sacrifices that the Sikhs have actually made, especially at this time. We hope you enjoyed all the snippets that we've put together from the previous shows. Next time round we hope to change the format and introduce new ways of bringing you some great Sikh role models as well as people from society. We look forward to seeing you next time, and whatever you're doing in terms of celebration, have a great one. Bye.